Hi everyone, so today's video is how to revise Mr Birling in 5 quick quotes. This is obviously Mr Birling's and his spectacles, and the idea is that this is quick revision video to give you the maximum gains and the minimum time spent. As you know, I'm Zoe Sophie from Past English GCSE. I'm an English teacher and I've been teaching for many years in schools, private and state, and I want to help students to maximise their study gains in the minimum time. So as you know, Mr Birling in the class hierarchy is a middle class man. He's married someone who's arguably sort of middle upper class, as she's his social superior, that's Mrs Birling, but he himself is a middle class man within the confines of the hierarchy within the play. Okay, quote 1. Perhaps we may look forward to the time when Crofts and Birlings are no longer competing, but are working together for lower costs and higher prices. This could be one of your quotes, and it's one of the early quotes where he is talking, giving a speech actually at the engagement dinner party, and his focus seems to be all about the business and not so much about his daughter and her impending happy marriage. I always advise to look at the quote, and a little bit of quote annotation can help you to remember as well. Perhaps you may look forward to the time when Crofts and Birlings are no longer competing. You've got the verb competing there, which is quite negative, all the negative connotations there. It really shouldn't be brought up at the dinner party, particularly in a play set in 1912 and subject to Edwardian sort of era conventions when people are supposed to be polite and helpful and not saying these sort of things. So you've got the negative verb competing there as some language you could focus in on. You've also got lower costs and higher prices kind of juxtaposed in this. Both of those word classes, they are comparatives. So that's another technique that you can use there. You've got verb, doing word, and you've got comparatives, okay, lower and higher, and you've got this focus on prices. The noun prices makes him look very sort of business focused, business connotations here, not making him look great at all, really, quite negative. That is quote number 1. Quote number 2, here's where he gets quite negative in his speech to the boys. The way some of these cranks talk and write now, you'd think everybody has to look after everybody else, as if we were all mixed up together like bees in a hive, community and all that nonsense. Various techniques you can get a hold of here in this. You've got the insult, cranks, okay? That is an insult. It is pejorative. Pejorative means sort of rude, negative in nature. It is pejorative. That's P-E-J-O-R-A-T-I-V-E. Very negative, okay? Anyone that differs with him, you know, he's labeling dissent as pejorative, so that's not particularly great, not making him look open-minded there. He also uses the simile, like bees in a hive, to describe people being mixed up together, okay? Technique there is a simile. It's kind of dehumanizing, isn't it, really, in effect, because he's likening humans to sort of worker bees. If you think about what bees do, you know, all together in a hive, you know, there's a queen, and then all the rest are sort of serving her, really. And he labels community and all that nonsense. Again, the nature of this is pejorative. It's very negative. So it's a really good quote to be able to pick apart in terms of techniques. Even if you remember some of it, some of these cranks talk and write now. It's as if we're all mixed up together like bees in a hive. You've got something to say there. This is all in Act 1. Quote number 3. Okay, this is when his part in Ava Smith's demise is revealed, and his response to it, and it links in very much with the key theme of responsibility here. He says, I can't accept any responsibility. If we were all responsible for everything that happened to everybody we'd had anything to do with, it would be very awkward, wouldn't it? This is a question rather than a response, if we really analyse it there, question technique. Very awkward. You've got the intensifier. Very. Intensifier makes the adjective awkward. More intense, obviously. That's what an intensifier does. So he thinks it's very awkward. If we were all responsible for everything that happened to everybody we'd had anything to do with, it'd be very awkward. You kind of see what his sentiments here are in terms of responsibility. I mean, you know, you have to have personal responsibility. But he says, I can't accept any responsibility. he has fired someone for being a ringleader in a strike. And Priestley is very interesting the way he constructs his play. We don't learn exactly how vocal Ava Smith is in this strike. We know that they had low pay. We know that you know, a lot of workers struggle to make ends meet. So, you know, there may be very valid reasons for her to be in the strike, but he won't accept any responsibility. So this quote makes him look quite absolute in his response here. So there's lots to say about him here being capitalist, not accepting responsibility, being very sort of individualistic, bit like the previous quote as well, not involved in community. Quote number 4. This is Mr. Birling's response about the inspector and about the questioning. So this is later on in the play. It's getting towards sort of Act 3 now. He was prejudiced from the start, probably a socialist or some sort of crank. Look, we're seeing that pejorative insult, crank, again. He talked like one. And then instead of standing up to him, you let him bluff you into talking about your private affairs. Okay, so quite accusatory in tone here, and I'm going to write that, accusatory, he's accusing, and tone is a technique here. Okay, so towards the end, he starts blaming other people instead of himself. And look how this is the play is very political. We know that Priestley himself is a socialist. We know that Mr. Birling is seen as the opposite of this. Mr. Birling's a capitalist. So when he's sort of likening, this is Mr. Birling, likening a socialist with a crank, sort of this negative insult. Okay, it makes it highly political, and it shows us that Birling sees socialists as cranks, crazy people, okay? So you've got the sort of political element here, which would come under context, but you've also got this insult coming up again. Okay, so it should be very easy to remember. Obviously, this is revision, banks on you having read the play beforehand, but these are some key quotes. Also, bluff you. Look at the verb to bluff. So he sees the questioning as, you know, bluff sort of connotes it being a game playing. You know, it's he who can sort of argue best. All right, it's talking about your private affairs. He is a very private individual. So there's quite a lot revealed about this quote here. Last quote. You've got a stage direction in here as well, hence the brackets. So just wanted to point that out. That is a technique in itself, okay? Stage directions are really important in this play. Don't forget about them. They're as important as language. Okay, pointing to Eric and Sheila. So the act of pointing again links into being sort of accusatory, kind of negative here. Now look at the pair of them, the famous younger generation who know it all, and they can't even take a joke. You've got dashes here, punctuation. Okay, so I'm going to put that punctuation of the dash, separating out his thoughts here. Again, sort of almost like indicating them. I mean, almost think of it as an arrow, and this looks like something else was about to be said and he's maybe interrupted. Now look at the pair of them. Right, third person distancing pronoun there. It's very sort of us and them. Distancing pronoun, running out of space, sorry, going to write here. Okay, technique underlined, like a verb, like an adjective, it's a technique, like stage directions a technique. Them. All right, very much me or us and them, quite accusatory again. The famous younger generation. You can hear the sarcasm in this utterance here, this line. He uses the adjective famous. Again, the nature of that, if you look at it, it's pejorative, it's negative. This is not savoury. He's not praising these. They can't even take a joke. So he views the whole thing as a joke. I mean, regardless of culpability, it is apparent that a girl has died. I mean, he sort of sees it as a hoax, I suppose. He sees it at one point as nothing's happened until the sort of the final denouement at the end. But even so, it's very serious, regardless of the girl. We know that various characters have done things, particularly Eric, that are quite unsavoury. And he knows this, and yet he can still liken it to a joke. So this is really Priestley portraying Birling as being a not very nice character. He's not making himself look very kind here, is he? So to summarise, Mr. Birling here's some adjectives for you. He is a capitalist, remember? Opposite to socialist. Opposite, I should say, of a socialist, okay? Priestley was a socialist. Mr Birling is not. He's the opposite. Individualist links with this. He's all about looking after himself, focusing on his family first. And again, that can be quite commendable, but it's presented negatively by Priestley. He's middle class, okay? He's not upper class like the Crofts, and he's not upper middle class like his wife. But he's done well because he's a prosperous manufacturer, okay? Prosperous, makes money, okay? He's worked hard. Potentious, this is an adjective used by Priestley himself in the opening stage directions, and it basically means pompous. It alludes to him being arrogant, okay? And you can see from quote number 5 about the joke, he's got that about his nature, which isn't great. Fairly easy manners, and I think Priestley presents this such that, you know, if you were as privileged as Mr Birling, you'd have fairly easy manners too. Again, to summarize, Mr Birling is presented negatively pretty much throughout the play, and this is all to do with Priestley's political agenda of undermining capitalist thinking in the play. I hope that helps. I wanted to keep it brief. If you've got any questions or comments, please add them, or feel free to reach out on my website.